65 years of service, adjudicated as a legal publication, 89 zip codes, 17 cities, unincorporated areas of the county, available online free, available over-counter sales and newsstands and by mail, and always carrying the motto that a people without a voice cannot be heard. And it is our desire to be the voice of San Diego's Black and African American communities. And so we're joined this evening by Dr. Leonard Thompson III, our partner in this media communication effort. And if you wish to tune in, make a comment, ask a question, participate, we are doing this live. You can go to godradio1.com, or you can call us at 858-251-6111, and we can take your questions or comment online as a part of this program. So, Dr. Thompson, if you would.
Well, Dr. Warren, I have to say that it has been a tremendously busy week. So much has been going on, and I want to say kudos to the San Diego Voice and Viewpoint. You guys have had some amazing shows, some amazing town hall meetings, and it's just been great. The work that you are doing with Stop the Hate is just outstanding, and we want to just keep up the good work. Biscuits, Grits, and Politics, it was intimate, but I believe that we literally made some great impacts, and a lot of people from around the nation are looking and listening and paying attention. So I'm excited about that very piece of what we are doing and how we are doing it at this time in the season.
Well, we're excited to be, not only do we do Biscuit Grits and the town hall meetings and partner with what we're doing, but the Voice and Viewpoint is the host sponsor of Black Men and Women United, which has been around since 2005. And we are an informal association of African Americans and Black folks who come together weekly, now on Zoom. For many years, we met in person before the pandemic. And we discuss issues. Well, we're excited to be trying to be of service to each other and how we can help. And so we're great. We have some great times. And this has been busy. We're moving into, we're already in the graduation season, mm-hmm. and we've already had some significant events like the Black Baccalaureate, which has gone on for about 3.5 decades at San Diego State, which took place. And then we had the Golden Pyramid with the San Diego Urban League, and we're moving into graduation promotional events, and we're going to be producing around the latter part of June a Salute to Grads edition of the Voice and Viewpoint. And we'll have many of these institutions with their graduates and editorial comments in the paper. So we're excited about that as we continue kind of a whirlwind schedule. We're headed toward Juneteenth, mm-hmm. and there are a lot of events that we've already made note of that we're going to be publicizing for people to keep up with. We also are moving in the direction of Father's Day, yeah. which a lot of us kind of laugh at because dads don't get the kind of attention that moms do, but we're okay with that. We understand how that all works.
Well, I always tell people when Father's Days come around, and, being that we're in the media business and entertainment, Father's Day is always a work day. And so not only are we're working, but also I said if I can just get a little bit of peace and quiet, a little bit of downtime.
That's all we want.
And just a little meal. Yeah. I don't need a big fuss.
No.
Come, pat me on the head, kiss me on the cheek, and I'm good.
Yeah. We don't need the hallmark moments.
Yeah.
So that makes a big difference. We have a number of things to talk about this evening, Dr. Thompson. Because there's a lot going on. Nationally, we've been consumed with the Trump's trial, which has now moved to jury, and that we don't know how many days or hours or how long that's going to take, but a lot of us will be glad when it's over so we can get on to other issues. We have an international crisis on the scene because America made certain overtures about withdrawing support from Israel if they went into Rafah. And so we've had protests here and our colleges and universities about the Palestinian crisis. And then we see Sunday, in spite of everything that's been said, Israel went ahead and they said they did strategic surgical attacks in Rafah, but they killed over 45 men, women, and children. And they've blatantly made the statement that they think this will go on through the end of the year.
Yeah.
And so now, what's America going to be? Are we going to be the paper tiger? We said we would withhold ammunition. They verified that the bombs that were used to kill the people were made by America. Benjamin Netanyahu, as Prime Minister of Israel, has in effect said to Biden, I don't care what you say, go screw yourself. We're going to do what we want. They've said it to the world, and the killing continues, the suffering, the loss of life is going on. The borders are closed in terms of getting emergency food and medical supplies in. And it is an act of genocide. It's an active act of genocide against the people who have a problem, but the people are paying with their lives and with the next generation in terms of over 35,000 folks have been killed since October. And nothing justifies what the Palestinians did in Israel, but neither does the Israel response justify the level of carnage and murder that's taking place now, where everything, whole 3 million people have been left homeless, basically, and foodless and suffering, and medical teams are under pressure, and we can't ignore it. And while we have that happening there, here in America, we just came through, some people it was the Memorial Day weekend, but for many people in the South and up that corridor, over 21 people were killed through those tornadoes that just leveled everything, and the destruction that's taking place. And a lot of us out here are just kind of kicked back and relaxed and thinking that everything's fine, and it's not fine. There's a great deal of pain and suffering. We have issues here, even in our community. The homeless numbers are going up. And someone chided me recently in a comment that I put it in the paper, letter to the editor, complaining that I spent time reciting the problems but didn't offer solutions. I am not in the business of giving the solutions. My business, from a media standpoint, is to help make you aware of what's happening. The very word news stands for north, east, west, and south in terms of the four directions of the planet gathering information so that we can be an informed people, we can make informed decisions, and we can hopefully, working with us, which is called and known as the fourth estate, that's what the media is, that we have a tremendous role to play. And so I'm a little concerned that a lot of our people seem to be on recess. I see a disconnect as we do the Hate Project and we reach out to other ethnic communities. While hate is an issue being directed at certain people, often by a dominant group, I'm also concerned that there are very strong signs of hostilities between the subgroups that are affected by the hate, where we try to get people to talk to each other, to come together and to be concerned, to be supportive, to be part of the healing and the solution. And that seems to be a real issue. So we have a lot on our plate. On a better note, we are also, next month the new police chief takes office. Next month, I think they're going to be selecting a fire chief. But we just had a vote by the Board of Supervisors to appoint the deputy chief financial officer, who happens to be African American, Ebony Shelton, to the position of CAO, Chief Administrative Officer. And we have not had a black person as Chief Administrative Officer in San Diego County since Cliff Graves back in 1984-85, who came to us from OMB.
So can I just jump in real quick? And I want to say that you said something I don't think that a lot of people did not know, and even I have to admit that I did not know. I did not know that news stood for North, East, West, and South.
Yes.
And I think that a lot of times you drop these little nuggets, and a lot of people, I think we have to highlight those things because as we're beginning to educate and desiring to get more people connected to what is valuable, when those little nuggets drop, we need to stop and say, wait a minute, news stands for North, East, West, and South. Ding, 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 ding. And like I said, other people might say, well, Lynn, I knew about it. Dr. T, I knew about it. You didn't know about it. But I think that's really big. And number two is, as you're moving forward, one of the things that was really sad, and I saw a discussion talking about African Americans in voting. And they said, we hear a lot of complaints. We hear a lot of people saying what could be, should be, and everything else that nature. But then when they go back and look at the black vote only was 10% of the black voters that could vote actually voted. And so basically, we have 90% of the eligible voters saying that we don't want to play anymore. We don't want to be in the game. But we then see when it comes to protests and when it comes down to disgruntledness and things that are unfair, we'll see 90% complaining, but only 10% willing to do the work.
Well, Dr. Thompson, as much as I wish that this was a new revelation, over 50 years ago when I first ran for office in my 20s, I came into the political scene in Washington, D.C. with a heart for the people, wanting to help the little guy and wanting to buck and fight the system. And I learned the very hard way over 10 years of public service that the people who cry the loudest and want you to do the most are the people who will not register to vote for the most part. They will not have staying power. They will come to a public meeting and they will be there just for a little while and then they leave. Very, very seldomly will they stay the course and stay the whole time. Now, this does not go unobserved because if you look at the San Diego Unified School District Board of Education, one of the things I understand they did is that they shifted public comment to the end of the meeting. Well, in long board meetings, you're not going to have any public there at the end of the meeting. So there'll be very few people who will actually stay and go through that. And before we moved into this computer age, when I was an elected official, I kept a voter printout on my desk. And when people came to me with issues, the first thing I did when they came in the office is I looked for their names. Because if I'm an elected person, then I'm there to represent the people who vote.
Yeah.
And I was known to turn people away and say, when you get registered, you can come back and I can hear your case. But I'm not going to take the time from people who do vote to give you the time when you won't vote.
Yeah.
And so, and we just saw something happen in the past 3 weeks when the Supreme Court ruled on the redistricting, and I believe it was in South Carolina, how they in effect said that politics could be okay for redrawing boundaries in what we know in the business as gerrymandering. And so to give the people here an understanding of what that might be, let's say you draw a district. San Diego County is the 8th largest county in the nation, 4,238 square miles, I believe it is. So it's a big place. And so, and then that whole area is represented by 6 people. So that means they cover a lot of territory. So after we go through reapportionment, let's say what they do is they take Spring Valley and they put Spring Valley in East County as opposed to being in a district that comes where it's more heavily populated. Well, let's say the majority of the people in Spring Valley are people of color. Well, they can raise hell all they want about what's going on, but the representative, and fortunately we don't have that, we have a good representative in that area in Joel Anderson, but the representative could take the position, I'm not going to worry about how much they complain about anything because I've got from Hamul to Hacumba to the Scanso, I got all the rest of this area, and the numbers there outweigh and outpopulate this little group that's complaining.
Yeah.
This is what the Republican Party has done throughout the nation. They started over 2 decades ago using algorithms to determine how best to draw these boundaries so that no matter how small their numbers were, they could cut across rivers and parks and land and stuff and create a district that was otherwise disconnected,
Yes.
okay, so that they could still be in control. And why? Because the masses do not pay attention, because it is by design that the masses are kept busy trying to struggle and work. Just one last comment to make this observation, because a lot of people have missed this. You know, when we went into countries like India, Burma and those places over there, or Africa, and we had people go on safari. If you ever see the movies of a safari, you see a whole bunch of black people or Indian people, they carrying all the burdens. They walking, they carrying all of this gear, and at the evening time, they've set up the tents. They put out the table with the white cloth and the linen. They've done the cooking. White folks just kicking back, enjoying the shade and sunshine. And so what do? They create a scenario in their economic system where they can't get but so much money because those people control the economy. And it's the same thing they did here. We have people who are waiters and waitresses, people who have small salaries under the illusion that they're going to have large tips.
Yeah.
And the tips keep them subservient and tied into the system. And so they're so busy trying to eat and live that they don't get a chance to do all these other things, okay? And that was the same theory that they used with the sharecroppers. When the slavery ended, the man said, you can leave, but you can't take nothing with you.
Exactly.
If you stay here, I'll let you eat. I'll let you buy stuff at what is now the store on credit, but I'm going to make sure that your bill is so high that by the time we bring in the crops and you pay the bill, you ain't going to have nothing left anyhow, but to start all over. And so we need to understand that this economic system is not the best system. I always tell people nothing is wrong with capitalism if you have some capital.
Yeah.
But if you don't have capital, then it ain't a good idea, okay? And so all these things we keep talking about here are issues that have been man-made to keep you where you are, deferred dreams, deferred gratification, while others enjoy life, and you trace the illusion that you're going to get there. And we could get there if we pull together and stop trying to think under the Willie Horton syndrome that the system is going to bless us and we're going to be better than everybody else.
Yeah. One of the things I want to do is tell everybody that we are multi-streaming on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook tonight. So just so those of you guys that are looking at different platforms, we are on several platforms tonight as we expand our reach and our territory right here at GOD Radio 1 from the voice of that's of the editor. Dr. Warren, we look at the things that are happening and you know how they call it a perfect storm. I believe that right now we are setting up for a perfect storm, and I really believe that how this case is settled with the Donald Trump hush money, the way this case is going to be settled, if he is not convicted, then they're going to use it to usher him right into the White House.
Well, even if he's convicted, they're going to try because there can be a split decision in this, and the whole country is getting a lesson in criminal procedure through this case, and they're discovering that there's, well, I don't know if they mentioned it, but, you know, there is federal criminal procedure, like there's federal civil procedure, and then there is the civil procedure, and there are differences in terms of how things are done. And so some people have said we might see a hung jury where maybe at least one person just disagrees and the judge tries to make them work it out. Some have said we might see a mixed decision where he's convicted of some items, but of all the 34 items, all it takes is one felony conviction to make him a felon. And then there's that question of can he even serve? I mean, we can't stop him from running, it looks like, but Trump's position is that if he gets elected, he can pardon himself, which is unheard of. but there's nothing specifically in the documentation that's
Mhm.
saying that you can't. And let us remember, and I'm beginning to write more about this. Um, we have this scenario where if we look at Alito on the Supreme Court,
Mhm.
who refuses to recluse himself, if you look at Roberts, who's the Chief Justice, who's supposed to be the one in charge of the Supreme Court,
Mhm.
he has lost all his power now because that Trump Radical Six, they have enough power that they don't need him. It's no longer a situation of nine people where you can get 4-4 on any given day, and then that key person can break the vote one way or the other in terms of the decision.
Mhm.
And so it's clearly holding back the decision that would keep him out in the federal case.
Mhm.
And we know that the Georgia case is not going to go to trial. The Florida case has been stymied.
Mhm.
And so he already effectively has the judicial system
Mhm.
in his hip pocket. Not only is this crazy, but you have the people who have been elected and know better that are going along with him
Mhm.
through the kinds of decisions that they're making. And I think that black people in particular should be doing what they did in Georgia. We should be mobilizing a vote like never before.
Mhm.
And people should be turning out to vote
Mhm.
because that's the only thing that's going to save us in terms of what is in store for us.
Yeah. And I think, Dr. Warren, and this is, and let me say, strategic wise as well as a capitalistic move. And so, I hope this becomes a soundbite so people can share it around the world. You want to say that you want things to be better. This is the time that you can make it better. If we mobilize the African American vote and we can get 70 to 80% of eligible African American people to vote, we are at the table. We have the bargaining power to literally affect change and affects change not just for the world, but especially for African American people. We have not seen the affection of change because of the fact that we have not been visible enough as well as impactful enough to make a change. If you're only 10%, you're a non-factor. And so if you're a non-factor, then I don't need to make any concessions to you. I don't need to come to you or do anything else because you're a non-factor. You're just a whole bunch of talk. And we do a lot of talking, but we don't do a lot of walking and a lot of doing.
Well, you know what? In fairness to our people, um, you know, um, Carter G. Woodson wrote a book on the miseducation of the Negro.
Mhm.
Uh, Most of America has been miseducated in terms of civics, in
Mhm.
terms of government and politics. Most people don't understand how public policy is done. I know I had this conversation, and a couple of I've been asked to institute a basic government class on Zoom, and it was suggested I might do it on a Saturday morning, maybe between 10 and 9 and 10:30 and 11, and help people understand how government is structured and how this whole thing works. You know, I keep talking about Biden. This is not about Biden because he's the favorite son of black folks as Democrats. That's not the case. As a matter of fact, black folks need to remember that before Roosevelt, we were Republican because Lincoln was Republican.
Mhm.
And so, and then if you go back a little bit further in history, you know, we had Alexander Hamilton, who was, basically black as the first treasurer of the country, but he and Thomas Jefferson, back in the early days of the Constitution and the battles to ratify it, Hamilton was was involved in the Federalist Papers in terms of what kind of government we were going to have. And so today we're not paying attention to government. When you and I went to school, we knew all 48 then of the states. We knew the capital of each state. Today, people don't even know which state. When we were in elementary school, we could draw a map of the United States, and many times we were taught how to fill the states in.
Mhm.
Uh, and we don't have any of those things happening today because we have such a surplus of information that there's an indifference.
Yeah.
And so, this week, today, they're having an election in South Africa. And it is the most significant election since Nelson Mandela, when he came out of prison and became the first president of the free nation. And his party is now on the verge of being kicked out because of the changes and suggestions of corruption and all of the problems. So the situation is universal. This Sunday, which I think is the second on Sunday?
Yes.
This Sunday, south of us, Mexico has two women for the first time in history running for president of the country. And it's got two warring parties and a party that's been in control for a very long time. And that election is going to be influenced by our border crisis, as well as our November 5th election is going to have the border as a crisis. And so we can't just sit back and not pay attention to what's going on. Even if we don't do anything immediate, at least we can be informed. We can listen. We can think. Black folks used to pay attention, even though we couldn't read and write. When I grew up in a little town in North Carolina called Henderson, they had a newspaper there called the Henderson Daily Dispatch. And they had this guy named Bob Harris, who I guess, God, we probably thought he'd never die. He would come on radio every day at 5 o'clock, and he, in effect, would read the paper, okay? And they didn't have any black paper boys. They had some little white kids on bikes that would come through, and they would throw the paper. You could subscribe to it in our yards and everything. But what I noticed that even though we didn't have television, and a lot of folks that were still doing the radio, and that's why they listened to the news that way, we read and we listened, and we had a good idea of what was going on. Even though we were working fields and menial jobs and we didn't do anything important, we were still listening. And that's why we went through this battle in the South to get the vote against the poll tax and against counting the jelly beans and all the things that they did to keep us from voting. If you ever saw the movie Miss Jane Pittman and you saw Oprah Winfrey play that lady that insisted on registering when they did everything but kill us for trying to vote. And here today, we could impact it. In a May 1957 speech, Martin Luther King gave this powerful speech, and it was called, he talked about give us the vote. And he said, if you give us the vote, we can elect the people with character that can represent us. Give us the vote. We can determine who the judges are. Give us the vote. And then we get the vote, and we squander it.
Well,
So-
my question is, Dr. Warren, but have we sold the vote? Because to me, it seems like our vote has been bought and sold, and the civil rights organizations have been bought and sold. And so they'll say we're going to support somebody, not because it's right, but because we have bought into the party or whatever. At this point in the game, and this is what I would say, and maybe our strategic attack should be reaching out to young people and really having these real dialogues, because the information that they're getting is they're going along with, okay, there's two choices, and we're going to go for this guy over here, but they're not making any power moves. Donald Trump, and I have to say this, he brought black people to the White House. He did some black things for black people, but if you notice that it only worked if you agreed with him. And if you didn't agree with him, black, white, purple, or green, you were out. And when you came there, you didn't have real dialogue. You had photo ops. And so my thing is that we got to get past the selfies, past the photo ops, and say who will literally do the work and who do we have enough influence. Like I said, don't bring me to a meeting for a picture. I'll send you my picture. If I'm coming for a meeting, let's have some real conversation. Let's have some real outcomes. And because I'm not going to leave my place of business or my home just to have a photo op to say I took a picture with the president. And we got a lot of folks out there, a lot of quote unquote community activists and leaders that all they want is the photo op to put up on their social media, but then they sell us out.
Well, I was in Washington and worked on the Hill through 4 or 5 presidents, and I saw black people get carried away when they had a chance to work at the White House. I remember I had a friend one day who was working at the White House. I think it was during the Clinton administration. My office was on the other side of Lafayette Park, and I called this person because we had been active through American Society for Public Administration, done a lot of things together. And when I called this person one day, it was something. The secretary came back and said, "Is this business or personal?" And because Miss So and So don't have time for personal calls. And so my response was, "Tell Miss So and So I'll see her when this administration is over and she has lots of time on her hands." And we get carried away in terms of what we could be doing, Dr. Thompson. You know, as you were speaking, I was remembering over 25 years ago when we had the March on Washington, the Million Man March. The Million Man March came 2 weeks after the O.J. Simpson acquittal occurred. And white America was so mad that Simpson got off that they were beginning to start a backlash. I remember going on KUSI here to have discussion with people early in the morning because people were trying to get worked up. Black Americans, it wasn't that they were in love with OJ, but they were enamored with the fact that for the first time, a black man had beat the system. And so that's what they were excited about. And so we got 1 million people in Washington. But if you think about it today, we have a generation that was not even born when that took place. They have no idea of what led 1 million people to come there. They don't really have any idea of what led the 250,000 to come when Dr. King did the March on Washington. And not only that, they miss it. But, you know, out of tragedy, there's good. And when I think to the George Floyd scenario during the pandemic, which was over 4 years ago, and I saw people take to the streets, for the first time, people had time on their hands to take to the streets. For the first time, I saw more young white kids out there, many times between Floyd and the other blacks that were killed by the police in the midst of that. Many times there were more whites responding than there were blacks. So the whites got there first. And so we do have a generation that has a sense of consciousness, but they don't have a history in terms of what's taking place. And so we need a little bit of history so that we can focus and not make the same mistakes that were made in the past. The civil rights was not a great struggle. It wasn't a perfect scenario. There were conflicts, inner groups. There was fighting and disagreement, but there was also prayer as they pulled together to make things happen. And so San Diego is one person talking about San Diego. San Diego has always been laid back because people could afford to be laid back. The late Councilman Reverend George Stevens used to say, the reason you can't get them more excited here is because they can always get a taco, you know, and it don't get but so cold. So the people don't really, but in his day, we did not have the homeless crisis we have now. You see the people being pushed to the east to clear out downtown.
Yeah.
Okay, and we still have crises. So we have to, if we start voting, I keep saying this, 49% of the residents of San Diego County are renters. If 49% of those people were registered to vote, we could turn around what landlords are doing in terms of ripping us off with rents.
Yeah.
We could make an indent on these high rises that are going up, that are being built by joint ventures and capitalists, and they are sitting empty while we're being sold the issue that we need more affordable housing when we already have available housing that pressure could open up to some people.
Well, Dr. Warren, you know, there's the famous statement that the revolution will not be televised. But the reality is that the revolution is being televised, and we're sitting back watching it on TV and watching it happen to us, but we're not responding and reacting and actually getting involved. This is so simple as vote. That one little element of voting and being engaged enough to know what is taking place to vote. Again, like you said, 45% of San Diego, the most expensive city in the nation to live in, to rent, to get property in, 45% of those people are renters. If
49%.
49%, if those 49% of the became voters and started voting for rent control, there is nothing that these property owners can do to get around the legality of it all. So either you sell or you cut the mustard and lower these prices. Again, there you cannot tell me, I'm sorry, maybe I'm just simple, maybe I don't understand simple mathematics, maybe I just don't see the things that everybody else is seeing. But there is too much building going on in the city of San Diego for us to be having such a housing crisis. And I think that there should be a law that every landlord has to report if their buildings are vacant, if their apartments are not rented, not held open, but are not legally rented. Now, if you're going to tell me, and here's the thing, Dr. Warren, and if it's a corporate apartment per se, and you're going to list it as a corporate apartment, we need to know how many corporate apartments you have in your building. So if 10% of your whole building is corporate apartments and it's sitting empty, then we know that you are basically holding back space because you're trying to drive up the price. That is the only way that we're going to have to do it. We're going to have to do it via the law.
Well, yeah, because we can't do that now. And, not all of the buildings that these high rises, I can think of at least 5 or 6 new ones downtown. And many of them are condominiums. Mm-hmm. Okay. And though those condos are selling, a couple of $1 million, the prices are up there. We saw a situation where one building went up and they all agreed to a mixed use. But what they did in this one area down off 16th Street with those twin high rises, the people that they were allowing to live in, or the low and moderate income, they wanted to restrict them to a backdoor entrance to the property, mm-hmm. and not allow them to use the facilities that were in the building. Mm-hmm. And the Housing Commission had to step in, and it was a lawsuit to change that. And so there's always going to be this effort to segregate us. When the Bolshevik Revolution took place in Russia, the proletariats, the rich, the poor, the people came together, and they took the property. They took those big homes that people had, and they turned the homes into slums, if you will. If you go back and watch an old movie like Dr. Zhivago, you'll see, tons of families living in a house that was once a single-family occupancy, and people are occupying rooms and corners and cracks and crevices in terms of where they're living. And so we don't have the kind of winners here that drive people the way back east does in terms of housing. I mean, the weather here is like, the shelters that we build, the whole thing. We just need to get more involved in what's going on. Mm-hmm. And people can't afford to buy these days, though they keep trying to sell the idea of it. But the system has already turned to shut the poor out. Mm-hmm. The interest rates are up. All of the adjustments that were made in terms of giving mortgages after the 2009-10 housing explosion, those doors have closed. Mm-hmm. And so the dream has been deferred, if you will, for so many. Yeah. But we don't want to have a sense of hopelessness. We want to encourage people to dream, because our ancestors, they did not let segregation, Jim Crow, hatred, and racism stop them.
Mm-hmm. And then we also have to go back to strategy. We have to go back to strategy and say, and how can we win? That's the one thing that I gave credit for us back in the 60s and when people were fighting for their life and fighting for rights. There was always a strategy. And I literally, and people say, well, Lynn, Dr. T, let's really talk about this whole strategy. And I'm like saying, it's not something new. I'm watching my Latino counterparts use the strategy. I'm watching my Asian counterparts using the strategy. What I am not seeing is a tremendous amount of us African Americans using the strategy.
But they got the strategy from us.
Exactly. But when we got comfortable, you feel what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We got comfortable in what we thought we had, And then what happened is, and watch this, we had generational wealth, but then when the houses started going up and people said, oh, I can do a quick come up, and they would sell their parents' houses because they were so much equity in it, and they would go and try to buy out in Menifee or somewhere else and everything for a bigger space to be bigger. They lost the fact that there was generational wealth where the house that you bought, you paid this amount of money for, but the house over there had the equity. So why didn't we just keep that house, pull the equity out, and buy another house? So now we got two houses. We built generational wealth, and I've watched, and I have to say this, I've literally watched African American people literally buy their way into or out of generational wealth. You know what I'm saying? We sell the house, we go buy a Cadillac.
Uh-huh.
You know what I'm saying? You sell the house and you go and buy a $5,000 or $500 purse, versus realizing that, this is just me. I back when I was young, I spent money like that in my 20s. But the reality came in the 30s that, the Mont Blanc pens and the Rolex watches was not going to give me generational wealth. It was going to give me flossing rights, but flossing rights don't pay the bills.
Well, I guess I was too parsimonious, which is another word for cheap, to have wasted money. It was always the idea that it wasn't what you had on you, but what you had in you, that made the difference in terms of who you were and where you would go. And so we it's not too late for us to pick up the pieces, but there are a lot of people that look like us that are not about us. Mm-hmm. And we know from what we do with Black Men and Women United and what I do with the Voice and Viewpoint, I have people that come to me when they get in a crisis. Mm-hmm. All they have to do is have the people on the job use the N-word, and then all of a sudden they feel discriminated against, and they want stop the world while I get on. But you weren't doing anything to help anyone beforehand, but yourself. And so we need to get back to looking at what can we do. George Stevens started this idea about what did he call it? Was he had a do good day, or do a good deed, do something good for someone. Mm-hmm. It's a rewarding feeling. I want to share the story. We had a story come up in the past few days about a financial gift that was given to the black students at San Diego State, the Black Student Center. And an Asian family gave a $5 million gift to the Black Student Center at San Diego, not to San Diego State, but to the Student Center. And it turns out that what happened was, back in the 1880s, when Coronado still had a whole bunch of black folks living there, and when the railroad was completed on the West Coast, when they were building the railroad, this intercontinental connection, on the southeast there were blacks that were working on the railroad. When they got to the southwest, there were Mexicans that they used and Indians. But when they got to the west, they imported, through an agreement with the Chinese government, they imported all the Chinese that they could bring in, and because they worked free, cheap labor, no problem. Once the railroad was completed, it was decided we got too many Chinese, we got to get rid of them. So not only did they pass the Chinese Exclusion Act, some say 1880, 1870, whichever it was, but they also started deporting people. Sound familiar? Mm-hmm. They started gathering up Chinese, and they put them in a lockdown compound. And from that compound, didn't matter if you were born here, if you looked Chinese, and they could grab you. They put you in a compound, and from the compound they put you on a ship and sent you back to China. And so what happened was, this Chinese family was here. They couldn't get housing. There was a black man on Coronado who was also a blacksmith, and he was also always helping people. And he rented accommodations to this Chinese family that couldn't find a place to live. And then we know that at the very early stages, the white communities in San Diego came together and imposed the restrictive covenants to make sure that blacks and people of color could not buy any property. But this gentleman had already owned property before all of this went into effect. And when he moved from Coronado, and this Chinese family couldn't find property because no one would sell it to them because they were Chinese, he sold them the property that he had.
Yep.
And over 100 and some years later, his descendants come back now, realizing wanting to do something, and they sold some property and gave $5 million to the Black Student Center of San Diego State. Mm-hmm. Now, that's what you call having cast your bread upon the water, as the scripture says, and in many days it'll come back. Mm-hmm. And it's so significant that they did it to the student center, not to the university, because they didn't want the university to control the money. They wanted to make sure it went to the people who had helped them ancestrally. This is why we need to know something about our history and where we come from and who we are. And you know, Dr. Thompson, I almost need to apologize. We have consumed the time with this class that we've been doing here as we're talking. And I hope that people who are listening, that we're stimulating some ideas and thoughts on your behalf. And if so, you need to do something with it. Write it down. Take inventory of where you are. What can you do? Can you help someone? Try it and see if you like it. And let us hear from you. Write to us. Send us an email. If you want to be a part of Black Men and Women United, when we get together on Tuesday mornings, just call the paper and leave your email, and we'll send you the link.
Well, you know, Dr. Warren, my challenge is simply this, and because as we were talking today, that news thing really got me. I really like that north, south, east, and west. I really like that piece. But one of the things that I do want to say that I think is very, very significant is that we keep talking about rent control here in the city of San Diego. We've talked about it. Some people have even tried to push it, but it has not been successful. I still think that we need to retake it up again. I think that we need to literally sit down and know. See, you can say you want rent control, but you got to really be able to lay out what the law will do so that the law is effective. So you actually need some lawyers on it, because you could say, look, I want rent control, but what does that mean? And if we're going to vote on it, we got to make sure that it's clear and concise, and that there's no what we call loopholes.
Well, we've been down this road many times before, Dr. Thompson, and sometimes it's the language that we use. We just passed in the past year and a half a tenant protection ordinance, which in effect has some elements of rent control, and all rent control is not good. I shared with you that pre-pandemic, we had a proposition here in California, Proposition 10, that would have brought those houses that were lost in foreclosure now being rented back to the previous owners under exorbitant rents. Those houses could not be controlled in terms of the prices, because all of the things that we had on the books going back to 1995, I think it was, controlled elements of properties, but it didn't control single-family dwellings. Mm-hmm. And so that made the difference, okay? And so these are our issues. I think we have a comment, and I don't want to miss out on someone trying to make a statement. What is being said?
It says right here, Dr. Warren, I really appreciate hearing your historical perspective. What do you think we can do to increase our collective historical perspective?
Well, I think one of the things we can do is start having more informal gatherings and circles of conversation, where we come and get together and we talk about the things that are of interest. This happens all the time on the East Coast. We don't do it enough here on this coast. Even when I was vice president of a public policy institute, and a lot of the people have been Republicans, and they were out of power under the Carter administration, we often flew up to Harvard in the evening to have these dinner think group meetings where we talked about employment, unemployment. Those were early discussions of welfare reform. And we did all of these things because we kept the conversation going. That's why Joan Kropp built the Peace and Justice Center at University of San Diego, because it's for that kind of dialogue and discussion. And we need to have more discussion, and we need to have more topics. The Voice and Viewpoint is willing to host those kind of discussions. We just need to know that if people ask for it and we set up the time to do it, whether it be on Zoom or in person, that we're going to honor the time that it takes to make it happen and not ask for something and then show up once and not show up again.
Well, and then I think it's like it is a perspective of how we can do it. You know, we do have the paper, and we also have radio, and we can, if people are really, really interested and people want to take it by the horns. Number one, write an article.
Yes.
That becomes
Letter to the editor
yeah,
can help.
that literally becomes a part of history. And two, let's talk about a show that we just talk about history.
Yes.
But we want to make sure that it's his story and not this his story. We don't want it to be bashing anyone. We just want to tell truth and live in the truth of it. And I think that it's so very important that we have so much, and this is what, and I want people to understand this, and I'm going to go back where the Bible says that in these days that greater works shall we do. You know, a lot of times when people say, well, how can you do greater works more than what Christ did? But just think about it. You know, Christ went from place to place to place preaching the gospel. We can stay in one place and hit all nations, but with the resources that we have. So there's the ability for us to do greater works, but we have to use, quote unquote, a doc where they say, use Moses, use what's in your hand.
Yeah.
Men and women of God, use what's in your hand. Black people, people of color, use what's in your hand, but use it in a way to empower the next generation, not just give fluff. There's a whole bunch of fluff out there. And I'm like saying, even with social media, you know, there's still something about filling the pages of a newspaper. There's still something about filling the pages of the Bible. There's still something about filling the pages of a book that we have to celebrate. And, you know, one of the coolest things when I went to college is that you saw black men and women walking around with books.
Yes.
You know, it was a badge of honor when you was walking around with a book, not just walking around with music.
Well, you know, that's so important because we have so much information at our fingertips. When I'm writing, you know, I can be on my computer and I can pull up my iPad. I got a question. I can put the question in and pull up the answer and keep going. When I was a kid coming up, if I wanted a book, I had to go to a certain corner once a week, stand in the snow in a line waiting to get in the bookmobile and get in the bookmobile, go through the card catalog, pick the book, knowing they didn't have it. They order it, come back the following week to get the book, and I had to wait 2 weeks to get a book unless I had enough money to go all the way downtown to the main library and go through that to try and get a book. So books were important to us, okay? Now, you know, we don't, you know.
And also, to have a home library was a very prestigious thing. It was almost the upper echelon when you actually would have a home library. And I remember my babysitter back in the day, Miss Moore. Miss Moore, she was an educator, but she had a part of, I almost want to call it a shed. And when you went into the shed, and it was a house, it was wall-to-wall books.
Yes.
Wall-to-wall books. And one of the things is that she gave my sister a book written by Frederick Douglass.
Mm.
And I'm like saying, wow. And so it's like we valued the read. We valued books because we knew that there was resources and information in there. And so now we have to still value the ability to read and to study.
And, you know, it's funny because my kids grew up with a library. I had a library. We had a library at home. I had a library in my study and a whole bit. Mm-hmm. And I doubt if they ever picked up a book and read one, other than listening to, you know, their mother and I talk. But Jerry was a avid reader, phenomenal reader, and half of my library is a result of her acquisition of books. And I've got books. We don't even have room for them. I couldn't put all the books I have in this room. But I value my books. I value books because I found I can go back to a book and I can relearn from something that I underlined or read. And I've had Kindles, but I don't want to read on a Kindle.
Yeah.
I want to hold the book. I want to
Yeah.
mark on a page and make my notes and things. And that's the ongoing process that keeps your mind sharp. And what's happened is that the studies have been done that show that people who still read books in their hands, as opposed to people who pull books up on Kindle or electronically, that the people on hand have greater retention rate of what they read. Now, I'm not taking away the people that have to go the other route, because we have people with eye diseases and eye issues, and so they need to be able to blow
it
the
up,
print
yeah.
up. But I tell people in church, I don't want anyone to come to Bible study and not bring a hard copy Bible. Some churches, and we know some here, everybody in the church has got the Bible on their phone. Well, yeah, you're gonna see it for a moment, but there's the retention that's not there.
Yeah.
So it's important. Anyhow, we're encouraging people to. We hope we stimulated some ideas and thoughts. We got a lot coming up. Graduations that we see do not represent the culmination. They represent a permission to go out and learn. Okay, and so we often get those things confused. I remember when I got a black belt in the martial arts, and people were thinking, well, a black belt means you've arrived. No, a black belt means that you've learned enough to know that you don't know, and now you can be taught and you're teachable.
Yeah.
And so we need to know that our cups are empty, and we want to fill the cups. Or to put it in modern day terms, you got a whole bunch of brand new computers walking around, but the hard drives are empty.
Yeah.
And the computer is no good if there's nothing on a hard drive.
Yeah. Or if it's infected, or if the hard
It got a
drive is-
virus with the wrong virus and things, that it's still no good.
Yeah, and I'll just say with this, to everyone that is out there, and it's simply this. You might say, how do we bring about a change? Simple. Have a newspaper reading club, and maybe you get together once a week at a coffee shop, and everybody pull out the Voice and Viewpoint and use this as the start of that. Start book clubs, start history clubs, start doing things that are going to stimulate your mind, beyond that. And just say to yourself, can I give 1 hour a week? Can I give 2 hours a week to stimulate my mind to that next level? Can I give, 2 hours a week to make a change in my community and get involved? Again, being in media, we hear a lot of complaints, but nobody else want to come and say we're willing to get there and do the work. So let's get together, let's do the work, and we want to encourage you. This is from the desk of the editor with Dr. John Warren. Dr. Warren, any final words?
We just want you to be blessed. Think about someone other than yourself, and get back to an old-fashioned thing called a little bit of bended knee time. Put some prayer time in so that you can find the direction that you need to go in. That's the best treatment for mental health, behavioral health, and all those things that the system wants you to take medication for.
Yes, sir. And with that being said, man, this was so good. I want some Bix's Grits and Politics. Y'all have a good night right here on GODRadio1.com.